It's funny, the things you learn about brokenness. I work at a museum, restoring ancient pottery, pieces that have been shattered for centuries. You learn about structural integrity, about when something's too damaged to save, when holding it together is just pretending. For years, I thought that lesson only applied to clay and glaze. I never thought I'd be applying it to my own family. But here we are. 3 months ago, my life was a battlefield. Today? It looks exactly like I wanted it to. I get up, I go to work, I bring history back to life. On weekends, I'm in my garage, refinishing old furniture, Jazz playing low, my dog, Gus, curled up at my feet. It's quiet. It's mine. And the peace? It's real. It's not the kind you fake at family gatherings or convince yourself exists because admitting otherwise feels too heavy. It's solid. But I had to fight for it. Every single, painstaking inch. My marriage to Sarah taught me the first hard lesson about broken things. She cheated on me with a guy named Ben from the physical therapy clinic where she worked. And when she left, there was no apology, no begging. Just a casual, I need to explore my feelings, Daniel, and you should respect that. Then she loaded her boxes into Ben's truck on a Wednesday afternoon, and I stood in my driveway watching it all disappear. My parents were there that day. They watched her load her life into another man's vehicle, and instead of supporting me, they told me I should fight for her. My mom, bless her heart, said marriage was complicated. My dad said I should think about what drove her to that point. And when I pointed out she was literally leaving me for someone else, they looked at me like I was being dramatic. They just couldn't see it. The cracks were already there, but they were still trying to smooth them over. After the divorce, they stayed in touch with Sarah. My mom would mention her at family dinners like nothing had happened, like Sarah hadn't walked out on 7 years of our lives without looking back. The settlement gave her half our savings. She left me Gus because Ben was allergic. 6 months later, I found out from a mutual friend that she'd dumped Gus at a shelter because Ben decided he'd try allergy medication after all. I went and got him back. He sleeps at the foot of my bed now in the small house I bought after the divorce, a 1950s place with hardwood floors that creak in all the right places. Last week, I was in my garage, sanding an old wooden stool I'd found at an estate sale. Jazz was on, Gus was snoozing, and then I heard it, a car door slam outside. I wasn't expecting anyone. I like it that way. I turned off the sander, walked to the front window. And that's when I saw her. Sarah. On my porch, holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 3 years old. Behind them, pulling into my driveway, was my parents' car. My mom got out holding a casserole dish, like she was arriving at a potluck. My dad got out and adjusted his jacket, like he was about to give a speech. I just stood there, trying to process what I was seeing. Sarah looked thin, exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants. The little girl, Maya, clung to her leg, looking around like she had no idea where she was or why. I opened the door before they could knock. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting. My mom gave me that controlling smile of hers and held up the casserole. "Sweetheart, just hear her out," she said. Sarah finally looked up. Ben had left. She'd made mistakes. She was behind on rent. Lost her job. Maya needed stability. "We were good once," she said. "You were a good man." She didn't have anywhere else to go. My dad stepped forward, put his hand on my shoulder. "You're a reasonable person, Daniel. You're a good man," he said, and my mom nodded enthusiastically. "You have a house. You're doing well. You could help." The little girl was staring at me with these big brown eyes, and I realized she had no idea what was happening. She was just being dragged into the wreckage of adult decisions she didn't make. But something else hit me in that moment, something sharp and cold. They didn't come because Sarah wanted forgiveness. They came because they needed a solution. Her life had fallen apart, and instead of helping her themselves, instead of letting her face the consequences of leaving her marriage for another man, they decided to make it my problem. They decided that because I had a house and a stable job, because I didn't burn my life down chasing feelings, I should absorb the fallout of her choices. My mom wasn't holding a casserole, she was holding a bribe. My dad wasn't offering support, he was handing me a script he expected me to follow. Sarah wasn't asking for help. She was asking me to be the backup plan I never agreed to be. I looked at all three of them standing on my porch. I looked at that little girl who deserved so much better than this, and I said one word: no. My mom's face went blank. My dad started to say something. Sarah's mouth opened like she was going to argue. I stepped back and closed the door. I locked it. I walked back to the garage, turned the jazz back on, and picked up the sander. Behind me, I could hear them talking. My mom's voice, getting louder. Sarah crying. My dad knocking harder. But I didn't move. They stood out there for maybe 15 minutes, maybe longer. Then I heard car doors slam, engines start, and the sound of them driving away. I sat down on my workbench. Gus had woken up and was staring at me like he was waiting for an explanation. And I realized something profound: my hands had stopped shaking. This wasn't revenge. This was protection. This was me finally recognizing that some people will watch you break and then hand you the pieces like it's your responsibility to fix them. I walked inside, opened my laptop, and created a new document. Actions, I titled it. * change locks. Install security cameras. Block all phone numbers. Email lawyer. Update emergency contacts. Revise will *. I sat there looking at that list, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Like I was making decisions based on what I needed, instead of what other people expected from me. My mom called that night at 9:30. I was already in bed, reading, Gus curled up beside me. I watched her name light up my phone 3 times before it went to voicemail. She called again at 10 o'clock. Then my dad called at 10:15. I listened to the notifications pile up like snow in a storm. The next morning, I had 6 voicemails and 14 text messages. My mom's messages were all the same disappointed tones, saying we needed to talk like adults, saying I was being unreasonable and cruel. My dad's voicemails were shorter, just him saying my name and asking me to call back. But there was an edge in his voice I'd never heard before, something sharp and angry underneath the surface. I screenshotted every message. I saved every voicemail. Put them all in a folder on my laptop labeled documentation. Then I blocked both their numbers. I blocked Sarah's. And I went to work like it was just another day. By Thursday, the calls started coming from numbers I didn't recognize. My Aunt Carol left a message saying I was being cruel, that a little girl needed help, and I was turning my back on family. A number with a different area code called, and a woman I didn't know said she was a friend of Sarah's and I should be ashamed for abandoning a child. I didn't answer any of them. I just kept screenshotting, kept saving, kept documenting every single attempt at contact. At work, my boss, Michael, pulled me aside during lunch. He asked if everything was okay at home, said I seemed distracted. I told him everything was fine, just dealing with some family boundary issues, and it was handled. He nodded. Didn't push. Michael's good like that. He doesn't pry. Friday morning at 6:35, I was making coffee in my kitchen when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked out the window. My parents' car. I watched my dad get out and walk up to my porch with this determined stride, watched him try the door handle like he genuinely thought it might be unlocked. My mom got out and stood behind him, holding her phone like she was about to call me. I just stood there drinking my coffee, watching them through the window. My dad knocked loud, the kind of knock that says, "Open this door right now." I didn't move. He knocked again, called my name with that edge in his voice, even sharper now. My mom walked up and pressed her face against the window, trying to see inside. I stayed perfectly still in the kitchen where they couldn't see me. They stood there for 15 minutes, trying different approaches, calling, knocking, checking the side gate, then finally gave up and left. I waited until their car disappeared down the street, then called a locksmith and scheduled him for that afternoon. I ordered security cameras online, the kind with cloud storage and motion alerts that would record everything. Paid extra for next day delivery. Monday morning, I had a meeting scheduled with my lawyer, Arthur. Same guy who handled my divorce. He doesn't smile much, but he gets things done. I brought my laptop, showed him the documentation folder with everything organized by date and type. He actually whistled when he saw how meticulously I'd kept records. "You don't mess around," he said. I told him I'd learned from the divorce to document everything, to never assume people will be reasonable or honest. He went through the voicemails, the text messages, the screenshots from unknown numbers. He leaned back in his chair with this look of professional satisfaction. "This is textbook harassment. We can absolutely work with this." I paid him an $800 retainer and left his office feeling like I'd just put on armor. Like I finally had someone in my corner who understood what I was dealing with. The security cameras arrived Tuesday, and I installed them myself that evening. Small units mounted under the eaves, not obvious unless you were specifically looking for them. Wednesday afternoon, they caught my parents coming back. I was at the hardware store buying sandpaper when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app and watched in real time as they walked up to my porch, knocked, waited, looked around, confused why I wasn't answering, then finally left. They had no idea they were being recorded, and I saved every second of that footage to my laptop, added it to the documentation folder with a timestamp and notes. Thursday morning, Michael called me. He sounded uncomfortable, apologetic. "Sarah came to the lobby asking for you," he said, and I could hear the unspoken question in his voice, the "what's going on here" that he was too polite to ask directly. I told him if she came back, to call the police. I told him I had a lawyer involved and this was officially a harassment situation. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Understood." And that was it. No judgment, no questions. I called Emily in HR after lunch, explained the situation without going into unnecessary details, and she added Sarah to a restricted visitors list. She said if Sarah showed up again, security would escort her out immediately. "This kind of thing happens more than people think," she told me, and I felt grateful she didn't make me explain the whole messy history. Friday, I found a card wedged in my front door. My security footage showed my mom's car pulling up at 7 that morning, showed her getting out alone, looking around nervously, then tucking something into the doorframe before driving away quickly. I didn't open it. Didn't even touch it with my bare hands. I used a kitchen towel to carefully peel it off the door and drove it straight to Arthur's office. He opened it wearing latex gloves, like he was handling evidence in a criminal case. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mom talking about legacy and forgiveness and how my grandfather would be ashamed of the man I'd become. "This is manipulative as hell," Arthur said, shaking his head. "None of this is about his health or family values. It's all about getting you to respond, getting you to break." He added it to our file and told me we were building something solid, something that would hold up in court if we needed it to. The following Tuesday afternoon, I was leaving the museum when I saw a woman standing by my car in the parking lot. She was older, maybe mid-50s, and she smiled this warm, friendly smile when she saw me approaching. She introduced herself as Diane, Sarah's mom, and said she wanted to talk parent to parent about what was best for everyone. "I'm not a parent," I said clearly. I unlocked my car and got in without looking at her. She leaned down toward my window and started saying something about understanding and compassion and how we all make mistakes. I started the engine and looked directly at her. "Don't contact me again," I said. Then I drove away and called Arthur from the car. He said we were building a strong case for restraining orders if we needed to escalate. Every incident like this just strengthens our position. That night, my friend Jessica texted me. She's Sarah's cousin, but we stayed friendly after the divorce because she's always been straightforward and honest with me. Asterisk, they're planning an intervention. They're going to try to ambush you somewhere. Just warning you, asterisk, she wrote. I thanked her, told her I appreciated the heads up, and I realized something sitting there reading her message in my quiet house with Gus sleeping on the couch. They weren't done. They were just getting started. And they genuinely believed if they just pushed hard enough, I would eventually break and give them what they wanted. The intervention was supposed to happen that Saturday at my parents' house. Jessica gave me the details Friday night. They'd invited extended family, told everyone I was going through something serious and needed support. They'd even arranged for Sarah and Maya to be there, probably assuming someone in the family would convince me to show up if they all ganged up together. I didn't go. I stayed home, spent the morning refinishing the stool in my garage. Around noon, Jessica sent me updates from inside the house. Asterisk, everyone's here. They're waiting. Your mom keeps checking her phone and looking at the door, asterisk, she texted. Then 20 minutes later, asterisk, Sarah's crying. Your dad looks angry. They're telling everyone you've changed and become cold, asterisk, I read the messages, turned off my phone, and went back to sanding. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Them sitting in a living room staging an emotional ambush while I stood in my garage doing exactly what I wanted to do with my Saturday. Sunday morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. The camera footage showed my mom's car pulling up at 7 a.m. Showed her getting out alone, looking around nervously, taping something to the door with shaking hands, then driving away quickly. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. I used a kitchen towel to carefully peel it off and drove it straight to Arthur's office without even opening it. He opened it wearing gloves, like always. Inside was a long letter from my mom talking about legacy and forgiveness and family history and how my grandfather would be ashamed of the man I'd become, how I was destroying the family over pride. This is manipulative as hell, he said, adding it to our growing file. This whole guilt-tripping about your grandfather? It's textbook emotional manipulation. We're filing for restraining orders this week. Monday afternoon, Michael called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, kept adjusting his glasses, not quite making eye contact. My mom had called the museum that morning and told the receptionist I was having a serious mental health crisis, and Michael needed to check on me immediately. I could see he was trying to figure out if it was true, trying to balance concern for an employee with the obvious weirdness of the situation. I sat down. I explained the whole situation calmly and clearly, the divorce, the boundaries I'd set, the lawyer I'd hired, the documentation I had of every violation. Michael listened, nodded, and when I finished, he looked relieved. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Do what you need to do. We'll support you. I called Arthur from my car in the parking lot, told him about the call to my workplace, and heard him typing furiously on his keyboard. That's harassment and potentially defamation. We're filing today, he said. And that same clarity from the first night settled over me again. The temporary restraining orders were granted Wednesday. The judge looked at our documentation, the timeline we built, and signed them without much hesitation or questioning. Thursday morning, a process server delivered them to my parents' house. I wasn't there, but Jessica heard from family members what happened and texted me the details. Asterisk, your dad answered the door, read the papers, then crumpled them up and threw them on the ground. He's furious. Your mom's in tears. They're calling you unstable and telling everyone you need help, asterisk, but the important thing was, they'd been served. They'd been officially notified. And any contact from this point forward would be a legal violation with real consequences. Friday afternoon, I was at the museum finishing restoration work on a Ming Dynasty bowl when security called my extension. Your parents are in the lobby. They're saying it's a family emergency and they need to see you right now, the guard said, and I could hear my mom's voice in the background getting louder and more frantic. I told him to call the police immediately. Told him they had active restraining orders and this was a direct violation. I stayed at my desk while it all happened. Michael came by 10 minutes later and said they'd been escorted out by police. They claimed my grandmother had fallen and was in the hospital dying. My grandmother died 6 years ago, I said, and Michael just shook his head in disbelief. The police gave them a warning for trespassing and violating the restraining order. They filed an official incident report, and I emailed a copy to Arthur that night. This helps our case tremendously for permanent orders, he replied. The grocery store incident happened Sunday morning. I was buying coffee and eggs when I turned down the cereal aisle and saw Sarah standing there with Maya sitting in the shopping cart. She froze when she saw me. Her face went completely pale, and I immediately pulled out my phone and started recording video. You see me, you leave, I said clearly and calmly into the camera. I made sure to capture her face, the timestamp, the location, everything Arthur would need. She grabbed the cart and rushed toward the registers without saying a word. I saved the video, labeled it Exhibit C, and sent it to Arthur before I even finished checking out. Tuesday, Arthur called and said my mom had filed a countermotion claiming I was having a psychological episode and that the restraining orders were based on my mental instability, not their actual behavior. It's a Hail Mary, he said. She has no medical records, no evidence, absolutely nothing to support this claim. The judge is going to see right through it. The hearing was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m., and I took the day off work to prepare myself mentally. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Evans was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses. When I walked in, I saw my parents sitting on one side with Sarah positioned between them. It looked staged, carefully coordinated, a united front against me designed to make me look like the unreasonable one. Arthur laid out our case methodically, professionally. He showed the timeline, starting from their first appearance on my porch, the screenshots, the voicemails, the camera footage, the police report from the museum, the grocery store video, the letter taped to my door. He showed the calls to my workplace claiming I was mentally unstable, the manufactured emergency about my grandmother who died 6 years ago, the intervention I never agreed to attend. Judge Evans listened carefully, took detailed notes, and when Arthur finished, she looked directly at my mom. Do you have medical records supporting your claim that your son is psychologically unstable? My mom stammered, said she was just concerned as a mother, said a mother knows when something's wrong with her child. Judge Evans cut her off mid-sentence. Not liking one's family isn't a mental illness, she said firmly, and I watched my dad's face turn bright red. Judge Evans granted permanent restraining orders for 3 years. No direct contact, no indirect contact, no third-party contact allowed. Violations would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. She looked at my parents when she said it, made absolutely sure they understood the seriousness and consequences. Then she dismissed the court. I walked out without looking back. Arthur shook my hand in the hallway and said I'd done everything right. I drove home in complete silence. 3 months later, my life looks exactly like I wanted it to look. I go to work, restore ceramics that have been broken for centuries. I refinish furniture on weekends. I take Gus camping with my friend Alex when the weather's nice. I updated my emergency contacts at work to remove my parents completely. I revised my will to leave everything to charity, specifically arts education programs and a domestic violence shelter that helps people escape toxic family situations. My parents are strangers now. Sarah is someone I used to know in another life. And the peace I have isn't the fake kind I used to pretend existed at family dinners. It's real and solid and mine. What do you think about this? Was I wrong to hold my ground like that?